Welcome to the Silver Divorce Podcast, where we offer stories, advice, and support for people age 50 plus who are considering or facing divorce. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Pat.
And we're so glad you're with us today. And we are in the beautiful Whitfield Media Studios.
Yeah.
And we want to thank our listeners for our support. Our support of this podcast has been phenomenal. And we're very excited to watch the growth, but at the same time, we're really saddened by that so many people are going through the pain and trauma of divorce after a long-term marriage. And you know, I was on my way into the studio this morning and I was listening to the radio, and there was a song that really spoke to me, and it said, "Hold on a little bit longer, it's all going to be okay. The days are going to get better. There's purpose behind the pain." And I just say that to convey to our listeners that it does get better. And Pat was talking the other day about how she prays for our listeners, and we really feel the pain that you're going through.
Absolutely, Lisa. And I just want our listeners to know that we really care. We have a heart for this this ministry, and we care and pray. Lisa and I care and pray for you every day, and just know that we've been there. We've been through the trauma and chaos of divorce, and we know what it's like. That's why we're driven to do this podcast.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's go on with our normal disclaimer to let everybody know we are not attorneys. We are not counselors. We're here to share experiences and education we've gained and help you avoid the pitfalls of divorce. Also, while we share stories that are absolutely true, we're changing the names of the people involved to protect the privacy of the individuals, or as we like to say, to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
So, Pat, with that being said, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today, Lisa, we are going to explore the topic of managing your finances during and after divorce. And, you know, when one is going through a divorce, you want to protect your financial assets and also prepare for life on your own afterward. And, you know, it can be complicated, but with the right help, you can move forward confidently with making difficult decisions. And most importantly, it will help you avoid costly mistakes in a time when emotions are running high. And to help with those questions, I am so pleased to have with us today Mr. John Cleaver. John is a highly accomplished business executive, and he is the founder and CEO of Turning Point Group, or TPG, and it's a consulting firm that specializes in personal tax strategies as well as small business coaching centered around an educational platform teaching on how money works. With over 25 years of experience in the field, John has a proven track record of helping individuals and businesses transform their financial situation to achieve long-term success. Prior to founding Turning Point Group, John held senior executive positions at several prominent companies. While he was doing volunteer work with Crown Financial Ministries, where the idea to launch his company came from, John is highly respected in the business community and has the opportunity to speak at multiple conferences and events on topics related to building family wealth, small business strategy, organizational change, and innovation. And now we will welcome Mr. John Cleaver.
Wow, welcome, John. That is a powerful resume.
Yeah.
We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. I don't know. I feel like I should pay you for that. That was great.
We'll take it.
No, that was fantastic. So, yeah, I've been, doing financial coaching and strategies for quite a while now. And when I was doing the work with Crown Financial Ministries, it was a great experience and really came from the struggles I had in my own life, doing the traditional approach to building wealth, 401ks, things like that, and wasn't really seeing the progress that I'd hoped. So I started just consuming every bit of information I could receive, and then was fortunate enough to talk to some people that were far advanced financially that I was, and they were kind enough to kind of share their strategies and whatnot. And my thought was, why can't this apply to everybody? The mechanics work the same way. So that's where we started the company, and it's grown from there. So
That's great.
Wow.
That's wonderful. And we're really glad you're here today because
Absolutely.
we see over and over again in divorce with long-term marriages, oftentimes one spouse just is completely financially illiterate because the other person took care of it. That was their job in the marriage. And
Right.
so there is a huge education gap.
yeah,
And we also know that, with people over the age of 50, it has a future impact on their retirement. They're at a point where they're splitting nest eggs. They're losing half of their 401k accounts. They're suffering significantly reduced income. I think I read that in a divorce, among older people that have been married longer than 10 years, a woman is likely to lose 43% of her income,
Wow.
while men likely lose 21% of their income, going back to those baby boomers who, traditionally the woman didn't necessarily work outside the home, or she might have worked part-time. So they don't have enough working years ahead to make up what they're losing in the divorce process. And then they get in a position of, if they want to stay in their home, they have to buy somebody else out. They have to pay for the equity in their home, or they have to sell it. And it's tremendously stressful, but even more so when you don't have the financial knowledge behind you to make good, informed decisions. So with that being said, what are the top 3 financial considerations that people should be thinking about as they're moving forward in the divorce process?
well, obviously going through a divorce is very stressful, and people tend not to think clearly. And I don't mean that it is, they're erratic, but it's more of there's just a lot going on mentally.
They're emotional.
and
Very true.
emotionally, yeah. Some people are just trying to get away from something, so they just make rash decisions and whatnot. But it's critical, and I see this with not necessarily divorced couples as well, but traditional households. You do have opposites attract. So you've got one person that handles the finances, one person's like, it's not my thing. So, but it is critical that number one, you're looking at cash flow. Your situation's changing, whether you're the breadwinner or not. Typically, you've got the other person is either A, bringing in a secondary income, or even if they're, a stay-at-home, they're doing a lot. I mean, they may not get traditionally paid for
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Right. The
So-
value
Oh,
is
yeah.
high.
Exactly,
if
the
they're
value's
staying
high.
at home.
So that's stuff that needs to be covered. So when I talk about cash flow, you're looking at what the new income is, but just as important, what's going out, as well as getting control of that. And so many people I talk to, not just in divorce situations, but they're not intentional about their money. And what I mean by that is they don't have what I like to call a spending plan. You may know it as a budget, but I like spending plan because, I teach people how to have money to spend later, but also have some fun and spend it today too. And that's, there's softwares out there and things, but that is really the cornerstone of having a less stressed or maybe even stress-free financial journey as you're going through the divorce and beyond. The second thing is really about asset allocation. Divorce is, especially in the 50 plus, I mean, you're in what I call the red zone, to use a football analogy. You've got
almost at the goal line.
you're there, right? So it's
Right.
much, you've let's just say your assets have now been cut in half. The plans you had are not probably going to be there, so you've got a shorter period of time to grow those assets. So really looking at where you're going to put that money, and the tendency is I need to protect it, so I'm going to keep it in low performing assets and things like that. But on the other side too, you don't want to necessarily get crazy aggressive. Let's put it all on black 13 and see what happens. On the
Right,
roulette table.
yeah.
That's not the way
No.
to go. So one of the strategies I teach is something called protected asset classes, where you're able to get those gains, and you're protected from market loss, things like that. But just as important is a tax strategy as well. We can talk a little bit more about that later. But even on your investments, looking at how am I going to be taxed as I start pulling that money out. So that's really the second thing. And lastly, and I think this is probably the most important, is the money mindset. You know, a lot of people are going through pain, anguish. It's very emotional. You know, having gone through this myself, and actually on the very tail end of it now, you know, I've had some conversations with Pat. It's much more of an emotional
Yeah.
roller coaster than I
is.
ever anticipated.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that you know, that can cause rash decisions or
Exactly.
you know, operating out of a fear mindset. And that's why it's critical to have, you know, not necessarily just a planner, but a true financial coach.
Yeah, and I think while you're going through it, getting somebody to help coach you on that, because you see people who are like, I just let him have everything, or I just,
Yeah.
you know, I just walked away, let her have everything, because they're so emotional and they just want to get away.
I've seen that happen in divorce care.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so without really thinking through, as you mentioned, a spending plan, you know, how you're going to spend and live on that money afterwards, and what are the tax implications, it can really spell disaster. A lot of people a year later are going, oh my gosh, I don't wish I hadn't have done that.
Yeah, what did
Yeah.
I do?
Yeah.
So having somebody at your side who can advise you financially, yes, you have your attorney, but they're focused on family law. That's
Right.
their job. And oftentimes people think, well, my attorney's going to tell me what's the right thing to do. That's not their role. Their role is family law. That's what they're experts in. Get an expert in financial planning as
Yes.
well.
Couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. And not just after, but going through
Going
the
through
process.
it.
Yeah, going through the process. so.
Absolutely. And then you may make decisions differently. And then also you'll have somebody thinking for you who's not emotionally invested.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not, they're not divorcing your spouse. They're not emotionally invested. They're going to give you advice based on best practices. And
Well, and that's one of the things I really like about what I do. I love the fact that I'm able to impact people, you know, and help them, but the numbers don't lie. It's
Right.
The numbers are the numbers.
the numbers
And-
are the numbers.
Exactly.
That's right. Yep. Well, another thing that we see a lot about is the house. And there is a lot of confusion about buying out the house. And from our education, we know that, the best thing to do is get a certified appraiser in, appraise the value of the house. And then what happens is they take the appraised value minus the debt that's still owed, and that becomes your equity. And your equity then is split 50-50. So if you want to buy out the house, you're going to be responsible for that, paying the other person that 50%. So John, can you just tell us what are some of the financial impacts people should consider if they're going to keep the house, or what they should do about those decisions?
Well, first off, before you make any of those decisions, I think I want to reiterate what you just said: is get an appraiser, not the realtor,
Not the realtor.
not the neighbor, not one of the websites that
point.
you can go out there and just pull up. Oh, this is what it's worth. An appraiser is going to tell you what the actual market value is based on comparable sales.
Yeah, and there's two things that I recently thought about with that is if you get a certified appraiser to come out, if you do have to refinance, then your bank's going to accept that appraisal. Or if you're selling the house, the buyer's bank is going to accept that appraisal. If it's just a realtor coming out and give you a market value, the banks aren't going to accept that, and you're going to have to do it anyway.
Yeah, and a market
Yeah.
value is not a true
Yeah,
appraisal.
right.
But if you look at again going back to the decisions, and I'm always about the Ben Franklin T decision, pros and cons. That's how I make my
Yeah,
decisions
yeah.
on big things. But number one is going back to that emotional aspect. And I would ask, or have you ask, can you handle that emotional aspect of staying in that home?
Right.
That's something I don't think a lot of people think about. They think, oh, this is my home. But once that divorce is over or whatnot, it's going to be a lot different. It's a constant reminder. Having just gone through a divorce, I couldn't even handle being in the same town. I was up in Nashville, and it was just everywhere I went was, I remember this, and I can only imagine staying in the house, and that never even crossed my mind, was to stay in the house because of that very fact. But if you're fine with that, and it's got a lot of good memories, and you don't want the kids coming back, or whatever the case may be, or if there are young children, that is a great way to kind of help ease the transition if you can, maintain that house. But, I think that's number one, the big consideration, right, is the emotional aspect of staying in that house. What are the pros and cons of that? But on the financial side, is number one is, can I afford it?
Right.
That goes back to the spending plan we talked about, and having that, am I going to be able to afford, the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, things like that. That's depending on where you're at or what's going on there, and your income may be significantly reduced. There may or may not be an alimony situation to offset that, but is that going to be indefinite, or what's the period on that? So all those have to be taken into consideration, because that's the last thing you want to do is get that asset and then all of a sudden can't be able to afford it. And then it's going to be, you have to sell it, or, God forbid you lose it in a foreclosure or something like that. That's going to be a double emotional blow.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and some banks will let you assume the loan, and then you're at your current interest rate. But if your bank does not have that program, and you have to refinance, you may be going from a 3.1% interest rate to a 7.4 in today's market, and you really have to think about, what's that additional cost going to be, and can I handle that?
yeah. One thing I do want to just kind of touch on, kind of in that vein, I spent a portion of my career in mortgage banking, and just because the spouse can pay you off and or buy you out, so to speak, and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to quit claim my assets over. That doesn't necessarily mean the bank is going to accept that, so you're still liable for that debt.
Yes.
In most cases. But that could be a big blow to you if you okay, hey, my husband or my wife's going to buy me out, and then I'm going to move on and go buy another house. Well, you may not qualify, because that will still show up on your credit. That will still impact you.
Right.
So that it needs to be a true buyout, or if it is an assumable, again, work with your attorney on that to make sure all those I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But it wouldn't hurt to pick up the phone and call the mortgage company yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. When I made the decision to buy out my house with my bank, I had to go through the qualification process just as though I were applying for a new loan. So I had to prove that I met all the criteria and had to submit all the paperwork that you normally do, tax records, income records, to qualify again. So that's a consideration with the reduced income.
Exactly.
Can you afford, will you even qualify if you have to assume the loan or even refinance, which is even a heavier burden, because then you're paying refinancing fees as well.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, I mean, you look at the other costs involved of beyond just, can I afford the utilities, the HOA and everything else. Start looking at the maintenance.
That's
something
that's a biggie.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, because typically you've got one person that handles that, and
Right.
okay, now you've got to mow the yard, you've got to
Yeah.
fix the electrical issue. Oh, the toilet's backed up.
And I swear, as soon as you made the decision to buy out the house and it's yours,
That's when everything
my
happens.
dishwasher went out, my
Yep.
stove went out, I had all this plumbing.
That's
It's like, okay, we're going to give you a fire test right here, right from the beginning.
Well, and that's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's you've got to take that all into consideration. Am I going to mow my own yard? Am I going to have somebody else
Yeah.
do the landscaping? Am I going to have do I have a handyman on track or whatever?
Right.
But on the flip side too, for if it's the husband that maintains the property, I mean, there's again, okay, cleaning the house. What am I going to do about this? I mean,
Right.
I'm in a situation right now, just having purchased a new house. The floor, the wood floor needs the wax taken up. I'm looking on YouTube trying to figure out I don't know how to do this. I mean, so I mean, it goes both
Yeah,
ways, right?
yeah, it does.
And that's something that when you take all of that in consideration, there's a lot more of the financial aspect than I think
Right.
a lot of people realize.
No, they don't think about the whole picture.
No.
And again, that's why it's good to have somebody who's thinking for you
Right.
in
right.
those financial considerations.
Yeah, and that's where we go back to the emotional part of it, like John has pointed out. You have to put all that aside, and like we've said before, put it in a can and put the lid on it, because you're having to look at things as a business aspect. And, it's about your future, so you really, really need to plan ahead. And, John, for people over the age of 50, they are most likely to have an IRA or a 401k. So, can you explain how the process to split these accounts works and tell our listeners what a quadro is and how it works?
Sure. Well, a quadro, how can I put this? It's like kind of like running the gauntlet as far as getting all that process complete. But again, it can be a not a simple process, but it is a process that can be managed, right? So a quadro is a qualified domestic relations order, and basically it's a legal document used in a divorce to separate those retirement accounts, the 401ks, the 403bs, 457 plans, things like that. And again, I'm not an attorney. I just want to let everybody know that.
Right.
I'm not trying to give legal advice or anything, but it's one of those things that, it's going to equitably divide the asset. And that's something where, again, going back to the emotional side, you just keep it or whatever. It's not, and this is something I coach people, and I just want to touch on this, that, there may only be 50,000 in there. Let's say you're in your 30s, there's 50,000 in there. That's not, I'll just, just keep it or whatever. Or you may be tempted to cash it out. And you've got to look at the compound value of that, the future value of that. So, that money's going to double, let's say, every 10 years. So 30 years from now, that 50 is going to turn into 100. That 100 is going to turn into 200. That 200 is going to turn into 400,000. That's the number you kind of keep in your head of, okay, if I just walk away from the 50, I'm really walking away from 200. I mean, so,
wow.
That's that future value is not what you're going to base it on today, but it's the impact of treating it lightly, I guess, is what I wanted to point out. But, number one is, the determination of rights, right? The court's going to determine, okay, who gets what. Typically, it's going to be a 50-50 situation. So, but there may be something, I know in my own personal situation, we worked out okay. I'm going to maintain more of that, but I'm going to give you a larger share of the house sale, so it's equitable. Net, it's still 50-50. But, walking through the tax implications of that and everything else is important. Number two is the actual creation of this. Again, it's going to be drafted to reflect that division the judge decides, as well as the retirement benefits and things like that, and when that's going to happen and whatnot. It's one of the, from a financial aspect, it is one of the more challenging processes in the divorce. But again, it's something that is done all the time, so don't be intimidated by it. Number three is once it's drafted, then it's got to be approved, by the court. They're going to look at it and say, okay, yes, this is, what we discussed. It's outlined, documented, and all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And then the implementation, right? That's where the plan administrator, the employer is going to actually get a copy of it, and they know now they have their official set of instructions on what's going to happen. And then lastly, that quadro is going to, it's really designed to protect the non-employee spouse. So that's why it's critical. And you may think there's not much in there. It's not a big deal. But when you look at, again, that future value, it really, really is. So it's an important piece of the process.
Yeah, and it is a very specific document, I've learned. It's not something that you can do yourself. It is recommended that you use an attorney. Plan administrators, if they're not very specific with certain language, they'll reject it, which will cause a delay. And that delay could cost you money because if, I'm aware of an instance where there was a 6-week delay and that the market capitulated in those 6 weeks and the person got less because it's stipulated in the quadro that once they get it, the money's segregated, and while it's getting processed, whatever happens in the market, if there's a gain in the market, the person gets the gain. If there's a loss in the market, the person gets the loss. Well, you can be at risk of losing if you don't do it properly. So.
Well, not to mention, there's additional costs because you're bringing the parties back together again.
Exactly.
So you got all those costs that you're incurring as well.
So it's an important aspect that you need to pay attention to.
Extremely.
Yeah, that's good information. So, Pat, I think we're going to talk about stocks. I know I'm not a huge stock person. Pat, I think you've mentioned that you like to play a bit in the stock market.
I wish I could. Well, John, what about stock portfolios? How are those split in a divorce, and what are some of the issues I should keep in mind as these assets are split?
Well, looking at the individual situation. I mean, the stocks, the standalone accounts and things like that are pretty much, it's just, okay, it's a 50-50. It's an asset. We're going to split it 50-50. The thing that's really critical is, number one, looking at, okay, what is out there, and do you know what is out there? That's a key component. Your attorney can help you. Typically they'll do a Social Security account search, and look at, are there any accounts out there? Because if you've got a spouse who isn't in the financial mix on the daily basis.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Somebody that just doesn't have a clue. I mean, what do you recommend they do?
Well, again, that's working with an attorney. I'm not an attorney, but
right.
If you've got a good attorney, they should be able to advise you on that, on
okay.
where the assets are today, and what's going on out there. Hopefully you're in a situation. I know my personal situation. We've got older children, but we've got marriages in the future, grandkids in the future. So we wanted to have a very good process and be very amicable, and shoot for that. We want to remain friends. And so, there was a full disclosure of everything. But, it's something that may not be the case for some people out there, right? Divorces can get nasty, and typically it's not a surprise, at least for one person in the relationship. So you want to make sure that you do a full assessment and again remove that emotional "I just want out" or whatever the case may be, and look at the assets that are out there. The attorney can kind of help that process. Divorce attorneys do this,
so they can help guide somebody that just doesn't have a clue.
Exactly, but once you determine, okay, these are the assets and here's how we're going to split them. With stock accounts and things like that, that's something that you look at. Okay, I'm going to have those accounts transferred. You don't have to necessarily go through the quadro process, depending on what it is, but one of the new things that's out there is crypto.
Yes.
Yes. That's something that those are by design to be relatively, I don't want to call it invisible, but the U.S. I think it was 2 years ago started. You have to report that on your taxes that you have that you have cryptocurrency. Obviously, they want to tax it. Don't even get me started on that.
Right.
But it's one of those processes where it's a simple decision of, are we just going to sell it all off, kind of like the house, and just split the money? Or are we going to split the assets and I'm going to take those shares? I mean, if you're in a situation where you bought shares at 50 and it's now, you still have the positions that are now trading at 30, but you think it's going to go back up, you don't necessarily want to liquidate it because it's going to be the loss. And that's something that you want to minimize.
Well, John, what about the tax implications on selling stocks?
Well, you're going to pay on your gains. And again, this is where you want to work with a good, I call it a money team. I've actually coached on that, where you have a team of people around you. You've got a financial coach, planner. You've got a tax person, again, of your own.
Okay.
If you've been using Jake down the street and that's what you're in your family, you may not necessarily want to continue that if he's golfing with your spouse or vice versa.
Oh,
whatever you get my point.
Yeah.
So not that they would do anything inappropriate.
Right.
I don't want to suggest that, but
well, you want to be careful.
You want to be careful, exactly. So it's a situation where there are going to be some tax implications if you sell off, and if you get a loss, you can experience that loss too from a tax perspective. So that can actually help.
Yeah. So with an IRA, we know that you can roll over into another IRA, but with the stock portfolio, it's not as though you can just roll it over into another account when you separate it, or do you have to sell it?
No, you don't have to sell it. You can split it, and and that's what I was talking about. Again, every situation can be different. So I don't want to give a one-size-fits-all response, but it's a situation where you can possibly split the accounts
into two.
So you still have the positions; they just transfer the positions into the new account. And again, that's something you want to work with whoever's maintaining your account right now.
Right.
But if you do sell, you
just
could
be aware
experience a tax on those gains. So
yeah, that's an important consideration, especially if you're also taking a 401k and it doesn't roll over into an IRA, but you're perhaps taking a distribution. You have to look at the whole universe of what all am I taking distributions on.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is the total tax impact of that?
Yeah.
So, I just want to ask about Social Security. We read about that a lot. There is a ton of confusion especially because in these long-term marriages, and people are over the age of 50 and they're approaching retirement, or maybe they are retired when they get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's that question out there of, can I claim my spouse's Social Security, and how does that work? Can you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, there is a lot of confusion on this. Even in my own, my mother was in a situation where she had been remarried for 20 plus years, and we were having a conversation one day, and I'm her little boy, right? So
Right.
I don't necessarily, early on, I didn't really get into her finances. I helped her out a little bit, but now that I've been doing this for a number of years, she's kind of trusted me on that. But that was one of the questions or concerns she had. She's like, well, I don't want to take his Social Security. And I'm like, well, it doesn't quite work like that, because a lot of people are in the impression that, if you take Social Security, you can qualify for your own. But, I believe it's up to 50% of your spouses. If that amount is more than what you qualify, you can actually take that as a benefit instead of you can't get both, but as a benefit of yours, you can take up to 50% of theirs. So a lot of people think, okay, wow, I'm taking half of their Social Security. I don't really want to do that. It doesn't impact them and the money that they receive.
Right.
So it's if that's a situation where, again, talk to Social Security Administration about your specific situation. Your attorney should be able to guide you on this as well.
Okay.
But it's one of those situations where if half of their benefit is more than what you're receiving on your own, because again, you are a stay-at-home spouse or something like that, that could very well be the situation, and that's money that, number one, you're entitled to, and number two, it's not really going to negatively impact your former spouse in their retirement years, because they're still going to receive.
Right.
Their check doesn't go down because
No.
you're drawing on their benefits.
And
Yeah.
I'm really surprised, again, and I've got divorced clients, and we have a number of female advisors on our team as well. So we get a lot of females coming in that, I'm planning on a divorce, here's the situation. So there's a lot of confidentiality on
Okay.
that. But, that's one of the questions we get asked. And it's, again, you're entitled to it. It's going to help you out, especially later in life when you're on that fixed income.
Right.
So if it's available to you, I would, strongly suggest you take a look at claiming it. So
Yeah. And if both people are retired and they're claiming Social Security, it always comes up, will one of them have to pay alimony? Is alimony a topic when people are on Social Security?
that I'm not real clear on.
Yeah.
I haven't had a situation where we've had two retirees coming through us. Usually we're talking to people as they're coming up, and then going through. Our typical client is in their 30s, through late 40s. We do have quite a few clients that are in their 50s, but once they're in the retirement situation, that's going to be, again, determined on their total assets. If there's an alimony situation, it's going to be dependent on what state you're in, and a lot of different factors on there.
Variables.
A lot of different variables on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it might be, we always go back to, schedule time to go into Social Security and talk to them, because there are so many if then, but this implications.
And it might not hurt to talk to a couple of different people on
Right.
the same topic, because
Yeah.
you may get a different answer. But our company, we work in all 50 states. So we're not just here in Tennessee. As a matter of fact, I've got 3 appointments today. One's in Florida, one's in Texas, and one's in Washington State.
My goodness.
So it's, when it comes to that, it's very dependent on what the state is and what their state laws are and their alimony requirements and things like that. But it's definitely something as you're going through the process, not waiting until, okay, I'm at the end of it. Now I want to look at all these other factors. I mean, it's again, part of a holistic approach to getting your financial house in order
Right.
as you're going
Right.
through
As
the
you're going
divorce.
through it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a crash course.
Yeah.
You have to treat it like you're going through a course in college and you're going to get a credit for it
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the key to that is, again, you don't have to do it by yourself.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you go on the internet and try to figure it out via Google or one of the search engines by yourself either. It's a good place to start, because it's going to put questions in your head to ask.
Yeah.
But having that team around you, again, looking at who's going to do my taxes, can I ask some tax questions?
Right.
Who's going to be my financial person to help me with the financial decisions? Who's going to be my attorney, and things like that. And that's really kind of that core group. And then, again, going to who's going to help me through the emotional aspect of it. Pat, going back to what you're doing with divorce care, I mean, that's an important component as well.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, John, let me ask you this question. What are some of the tax implications people should be aware of as they are preparing for mediation or a marital dissolution agreement?
Number one is, kind of looking at getting the tax person, having
Right.
somebody to help walk you through that. That's kind of the first step. Number two is, as you go through, understand that married filing singly or it's not the same, so your
Nope.
taxes will change, and by your reaction I see you've
For
experienced
sure.
that as
Yeah.
well.
Discovered that one.
Yeah, and as did I just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's one of those things that kind of going into it with eyes wide open and knowing that there's going to be an impact. And if you have young children, how is that going to work? Who's going to claim what? And that's all part of the conversation. My situation is, we've got children over 18 years old. I've got 2 in college, things like that. And so the conversation was, okay, and we had it uncontested. We were trying to work through it all, and again, very civil conversation. But in the process, the state of Tennessee where we're at, they don't. If the children are over 18, they don't really. It's not that they don't care, but they don't get involved in it.
Right.
Their concern is minor children. So that's something that there's going to be tax implications if you're used to claiming the children, but as part of the arrangement now your spouse is claiming them. That's going to be an impact to your tax bottom line.
Absolutely.
A big one.
Those little tax credits, but those are the kind of the things that you think about. With regards to mortgage interest, if the spouse keeps the house, they're going to continue to get that. You're not. If you're in a renting situation. So again, having a good tax person, and I want to just make this statement too. There are tax preparers out there, and there are tax planners, and there are 2 big differences.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of companies out there are tax preparers, meaning they're going to look at your stuff, and this is key, especially if you're self-employed. They're going to look at your stuff and say, okay, well, this is what the IRS says, and this is what we're going to do. So I don't want to say focusing on covering their own butt rather than yours. What you want is a tax planner, a tax coach, somebody who's going to sit down and say, okay, well, I see your situation. If we take advantage of X, Y, or Z in the tax code, it's going to put you in a much better situation.
They get more in depth.
Yeah, it's actually the difference between before the fact and after the fact.
Exactly. And you can't tell that by the sign on the wall.
Right.
You've got to have a conversation on that, and your financial person should be able to help guide you on what questions to ask and things like that. I know when we work with our clients, we ask these questions, and we've got a couple of people that we refer out to that when I sat down at a company, I'm not going to name the name of the company because they're a big company, but when I do financial coaching, tax coaching for my clients, and when I've got my tax preparer asking me what they should do from a tax perspective, that's when I raised an eyebrow and said, okay, I've got the wrong person.
Right,
Because I
yes.
want you,
Yeah.
you're the
Wow.
expert. I
Should
want
be the
you,
other way around.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's when the very next year
Good
I
point.
found a great tax person that is constantly pushing me not to play in the gray. You definitely don't want to mess with the state or federal government when it comes to taxation, but coaching me and educating me on, hey, here are the things you can do, with your company. Here are the things you can do on claiming, different deductions and things like that. And it's there for you. And a good tax coach, a good tax planner is going to help you take advantage of those. Whereas a tax preparer is going to go, okay, let me get through this. Let's get on to the next one. And that's key when it comes to, again, you've divided the assets. Now you want to keep them. That tax equation is just as important as the growth equation. So
Yeah.
That's some really good information and very good points. Also, John, I want to ask too, once the divorce is final, what are some of the most important steps one should take to protect their financial future?
again, it's going to be looking at the different aspects that we've kind of discussed a little bit.
Right.
So, okay, I've got the assets, I've got the division. Again, we're in the red zone, right? We've talked about, okay,
About ready
I
to
don't,
the
I'm
goal.
not, I'm not 25, 26
Yeah.
and have all this time anymore.
Yeah.
So the protection aspect is just as important. I mean, you look, and I coach on this a lot too. You look at the market corrections, right? The market last week was, it was ugly. But it was short term. We've got some wobbly wheels going on in the economy. You don't have to be a financial guru to see what's going on out there if you're paying attention. But go back to 2007, 2008, or you look at 2000 to 2002. Both of those were big corrections. But and I've done seminars on this where you had $100,000 in 2000. You put the money in the market. Well, what did we have going on? We had Y2K. We had 9/11. We had the dot-com bubble. Yeah. Well, that was in 08.
Yeah.
So you lost a considerable amount of money. Then it started going back up like the market does. Okay. And then you were about whole, not quite, but about whole at your $100,000 in 2007. And then you had the housing bubble in 2007, right? In 2008. So the market dropped. I think it was 2008, the S&P went down almost 40% in 1 year. So you lost all that money again. And we're told things, don't worry about it. It's long term. You'll get your money back, which isn't untrue. 2010, 11, 12, okay, now you're whole again. But that's 12 years. That $100,000 is still $100,000. So you don't get the time back. You don't get that 12 years back. So now instead of 30 or 42, and the same thing can happen now as you're post 50, divorce, and things like that. So protecting yourself from market loss is key. But this goes back to the money mindset and having a good financial coach of, okay, well, what are my options? Do I go and put it in the market? There's a lot of companies out there willing to help you with your assets. But again, you want to go through an interview process and, okay, are you going to be a financial manager? Or are you going to be a financial coach? Is my money going to be actively managed or is it going to be passively managed? A lot of the companies out there with the names, right? The two first names as their name. There's several of them. They typically put your money in the market and they're looking at it once a year. That's not active money management. That's passive. The protected asset classes, that's another area. That's what I focus in, and that's where you can put the money in through index strategies with hedges and things like that, where I can put the money in, I don't have to worry about it. So if the market goes down, I don't lose anything. I only get the gains when the market goes up. So there's aspects of that, especially looking at your retirement years. When you go in retirement, I'm working with a client right now. The returns last year were about 3.5, 3.6%. It's like, wow, why so low? Well, they're in retirement. So the traditional approach to that is, okay, we're going to put you in low performing, low risk accounts, but they're also low risk means low reward.
Right.
And you think about that, you retire at, let's say 65, right? You're probably going to make it to 85, 90. So that's another 20 years.
You have to make your money last.
Yeah. So that's where that traditional, you're going to live on 3% of your money, 3.5% of your money. Well, think about that. That's, you have $1 million, that's only 35 grand, and that's pre-tax. That's why, again, the tax considerations have to be huge too, because you go into retirement. I've lost all my deductions. I don't have my kids living with me anymore, or they may be living in your basement, but you don't get to write them off anymore, right? You're not really donating to charity anymore. Why? Because now you've got the time. You care about that child. You're donating your time. You can't write that off.
Right.
You're not putting any money in a retirement account, so you lose that deduction.
Yeah.
And so, in the mortgage, you've probably paid your mortgage off or it's paid down significantly, all your mortgage deductions up front. All of those are gone, so you're left with a standard deduction.
Yeah.
And the other equation of that is, okay, I'm looking at taxes 20 years from now. I'll ask the two of you, do you think taxes are going to go up, go down, or stay the same? I don't have a crystal ball, but I pay attention.
Right.
And we're 33 trillion, in debt and counting, right?
Historic debt.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. If you want to see something really scary, there's a website out there called U.S. Debt Clock, DEBT clock.org.
I've seen that.
And it's
scary.
It's scary. And,
And, you think about somebody who's in protected assets and they say, I only made 3.5% last year. Well, look at what the overall market, if you were in growth funds, I think it was a loss of maybe 21% during that same period. So it really is managing your risk based on your age. What is the best option so that you don't outlive your money? And, we all know there's a lot of talk about Social Security and chances that maybe benefits will be slightly reduced in the future because they can't manage the sheer number of baby boomers that are retiring. And then
You bring up a great point, and that's one of the things that I get personally frustrated with, and I'll try to keep this brief, but you see a lot of advertising by financial companies out there, and the financial industry, the planning industry is shrinking as far as available people to give the plans, and you've got this massive wave coming through of baby boomers. Not to mention you've got Gen Xers and millennials that are in the planning process as well. And so that's where you start to see these minimum limits on, okay, well, there's one company out there that advertises, well, if you have $1 million or more, give us a call. We'll help you. Well, what if I don't? Am I supposed to go pound sand? I mean, and those are the people that really need the help. And that's one of the things that in our company that I really, number one, we don't have a minimum limit. I mean, if you've got $10,000 a month you want to put away, or if you've got $100 and you're trying to figure it out, we're going to sit down and give you the same level of service, same plan, and everything else, because that's my ministry. That's what I've been called to do.
Yeah, I think that's an important call out, because I always thought that you had to have $1 million to get a financial planner, and as you said, that it's not true. It's who.
No, it depends a lot on the company itself.
Yeah.
But again, you don't want to just okay, well, hey, they're X a lot less, so I can go talk to them. And you want to make sure that they know what they're doing, and also what are they doing? Just like the tax situation where you got the tax preparer versus the tax planner. Is it somebody who's just saying, okay, Lisa, Pat, this is what you need to do? Well, I don't. Just trust me. This is what you need to do. And there's a lot of that goes on, and so
it's a package deal.
Yeah. Well, so what we do is we go through an educational process. So, and I always talk to the clients afterwards. I'm like, did you feel that you learned a lot more about money than you did walking in the door? 99% of the time, we're getting yes, because we focus on a holistic approach. Not just you've got an old account, we're going to roll it into something. It's we're looking at cash flow. We're teaching people how to build a spending plan, because that's key. We're teaching people how to have an emergency fund.
Yeah, that was going to be my next questions about the person that just doesn't have a clue. These financial coaches can direct them, correct? I mean,
well, I haven't seen a lot of companies that go into the detail that we do. I'm going to plug my own company a little bit, but
that's okay.
It's one of those things that that's why I started this whole thing. Was I saw what was going out there. I saw how I was impacted. I was a poor kid growing up. I didn't even have a bed until I was in the 7th grade. I slept on a mat, a thick cushion. But I didn't realize I was a poor kid. I mean, because of the family I had around me. But my parents were divorced. And I saw the struggles that they went through. I had a single dad for a while, single mom for a while, and looking at all that. And so I was like everybody else. I went to college thinking, oh, I've got this. I got into banking, and I'm like, I want to be rich, right?
Right.
And the education isn't out there, so we spend a lot of time on that educational piece. So we focus on looking at cash flow. Why is it important? Here's the free tools to help you with it. We look at the emergency fund, having some money set back, because guess what? It will rain. It's raining today. I mean, it's going to happen, right? And then we look at, okay, if you have debt, the debt snowball. Crown Ministries taught me, I'm not proud to admit it, but at one point in my life, I had $60,000 in unsecured debt. Rearranging it, not increasing what I paid, but just rearranging how I was paying it. I got it all paid off in less than 4 years.
Wow.
3 years and like 4 months or something like that.
And I think this is so important. I mean, John, that you don't just reach out to the people that do have money, but like people going through divorce that is just at the bottom of the barrel, just trying to make it, and then you're willing to help them get their feet on the ground.
Yeah, and this is an aside, but I learned recently that the oldest Gen X is 43 years old. So think about that. You may not even at that age be thinking about financial planning, but what a great time to come in and start.
I can tell you right now, I'm classified as a Gen X, and I'm 54.
Oh wow!
So
you're classified.
No,
as Gen
I am.
X.
It's based on the years.
Yeah.
I'm one of the first Gen Xers, in that group. But and I'm a proud Gen Xer. But even the millennials. But we're starting to see more and more people wake up because they realize, number one, what's the situation with Social Security?
Right, the government cannot save you.
They're not, and more and more people are realizing that. So I think in hindsight, I think that the whole situation we went through with the COVID shutdown and things like that. Regardless of which side you believe, this side or the other, what happened underneath that was a great awakening.
Absolutely.
Of what's going on, what's important in life, what's really what do I need to focus on. And that's been kind of a neat side effect, I think. But going back to the financial piece, I mean, you want to have a holistic approach, not just I've got an account, I'm going to roll it over and it's going to be okay because somebody behind a desk at some company told me that.
Yeah.
You want to understand the numbers, and it goes back to seeing the light bulbs go off in your eyes, and that's what I strive for when I talk to people, because I know this stuff. I want you to understand it, because now you're able to make an educated decision on your own money. And the advisor, in my opinion, should be there to kind of hold your hand and guide you, not blindly tell you what to do. And you're like, well, okay,
Right.
And I hope it works out, because you don't get a do-over.
Yeah, I wish they taught financial literacy in high school.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Why don't they?
Why don't they?
That's a whole other. There are a few states that do. Tennessee's one of them. Florida just rolled out a plan. I think there are like 8 states, but even that is like minimal.
Minimal, not enough.
But I'm still waiting to use that Pythagorean theorem. My geometry teacher drilled in my head. I mean, it hasn't come up yet, but
right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I took into consideration after my divorce was, how do I protect any assets my children may inherit from me or other family members from being claimed if they go through a divorce? And my attorney advised me to create a trust for me and then create a trust for each of the children, so that any money that they inherit would go directly to their trusts. And if they would ever go through a divorce, they wouldn't lose any of that. So can you talk about the value of trust from an asset protection standpoint, John?
It's a big play, and a lot of people. I'm amazed. I launched my own company. We're going on our 12th year now, and I've been in finances for going on 30. I know I look 27, but
well,
wow,
Gen X is that Gen X in you.
Gen X. That's right. That's right. But no, going back to your question, it's extremely important. I'm very surprised how many clients we talk to that don't even have a will in place, and there are several documents. I would say about 9 out of 10.
Wow.
Everybody knows it's important. But it deals with a situation kind of like life insurance. It's like it deals with you dying.
You have to
people
face that reality that you could die someday.
And I joke around with my clients. I'm like, I'm not here to put a rain cloud on the conversation, but I'm here to help you plan for every aspect. And it's one of those things that the insurance piece, the will piece, and it steps in when you step out. That's kind of a light way to think about it.
Yeah.
And there are several documents that you need to have before you even have a trust. Number one is that will.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the final will and testament. When I'm gone, this is what I want. It's a set of instructions. Number 2 is the financial power of attorney. That's something where if you're incapacitated, the bills are still going to keep coming in. This isn't just for post-50 divorce. I mean, this is for everybody.
Everybody.
Right? Then you've got your medical power of attorney. If there's something going on and they notice something or this, that, or the other, you're incapacitated, can't answer the doctor's questions. Somebody there can answer for you. Yeah, in your best interest. And then lastly is that living will. If God forbid something happens and you're in a situation where it's life support, there's no brain activity or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't want to put that decision on your spouse. You don't want to put that decision on
No.
your kids. I joke with one of my kids, and I'm like, "Yeah, you could probably unplug me to charge your iPhone," that's a total joke. But it's one of those situations that those are the big documents, and that's the basic documents, kind of the 4 cornerstones. Well, beyond that is that trust, because there's a probate process. Typically, it varies by state, but it's low thresholds before the state's going to come in and take anywhere from 20 to 30% of that, and it makes the process lengthier. So the way to protect that is through a trust. And the analogy I give on that is like a treasure box. Like that's what a trust is. And I've seen where clients have set up a trust. They've purchased a treasure box, so to speak, but they never put anything in it.
Yeah.
The company didn't guide them.
Right. I've heard of that too, where they didn't put the house in the trust.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the whole purposes of the trust.
The house, even the cars.
Yeah, the cars,
the assets.
the house. Yeah.
We work with a lot of, firearm owners, to put those in the trust. But that's a great way to transfer those assets. And what you do is you set up the trust, right? You put all the treasures inside the treasure box, and you put the will, the instructions on top,
Right.
and then close the lid.
There you go.
And the thing in the financial community, and it's all about owning nothing but controlling everything.
Yeah.
And that's going to protect not only your kids through the probate process, but if something happens along the way, it protects it from lawsuits. And again, talk to an attorney about that, whoever's setting up your trust, but it can protect your assets from a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that there's two life events that bring out the most greed in people. One is death and the other is divorce.
Right.
Yep.
And if you've been through divorce, you want to protect those assets as well, and from when you're not there, but also it takes away the stress from your kids of having to deal with all of that.
Yes.
It's going to be hard enough dealing with your loss, but so it just takes the worry and the stress and the decision making and the fighting away if you have
Right.
those documents in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would agree 100%. I mean, as long as you have your set of instructions behind, it's hopefully going to be honored by the family. And it can create some havoc, but you pre-planning everything,
Right.
even down your funeral arrangements and things like that, and having all the assets in place to cover X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And communicating
Yeah. Yeah.
in advance that this is what I've put together and this is why, then everybody knows it's not a shock at the will reading that you've given all your jewelry to one kid.
Yeah.
But if they're not nice to me, that might just happen.
Well, and I would, if you don't have that kind of time or opportunity to put something in place,
Yeah.
write a letter to all
Right.
the kids beforehand,
Yeah. Yeah.
and have it in a sealed envelope,
I think
or
that's
even
good.
better yet, now in the day of technology, record yourself on a video and
Yeah.
have put it on a USB drive or something like
that's
that to
great.
leave behind.
Yeah.
Because
That's great.
that's something. I think back to my grandmother. You don't realize over time you may even forget what their voice sounds like.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I
And-
keep my mom's voicemails to me.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I will say, when I told my kids that I was doing a trust and then one for each of them, they were like, "So how soon can you have this done?"
Well, all joking aside, I mean, it's something that, I've got several clients, especially in the Great Plains State out in Kansas and Iowa, that they've got big farms.
Yeah.
And that land is extremely valuable now. And so it's one of the things, I had a client of mine, his father had passed away. They bought some property for $75,000 in the 70s. I don't know the exact year,
Wow.
but they just recently sold it for $2.2 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
those are things to consider, and if the proper paperwork's not in place, you're going to end up paying a lot more in taxes.
That's right.
Or even, having financial vehicles set up to cover those costs, so the kids don't have to. And that's what happens, unfortunately, in a lot of these larger farms, is they bust them up to pay the taxes and things like that.
Which
So
is sad
It is.
because
It
it's
is.
when people buy farms, my mother and father bought farms, and they did it as a legacy, a
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
legacy. Their intention was that it would pass down to their kids, and their kids would pass down to their kids, and it would be a family legacy. But if you don't have the right paperwork in place, as you said,
Yeah.
then that legacy, it goes away.
It does,
because you have
it
to
does.
sell it for the taxes.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that they're not making any more of it. So.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Look at our area, how much farmland is being gobbled up for housing
Yep,
subdivisions.
yep, exactly.
Right.
So that's really good.
Well, John, can you tell us what are the top 5 mistakes people make in financial planning?
Well, you look at going through divorce, and like we discussed earlier, you're going to go through a lot of emotional roller coaster.
Right.
I mean, even my own personal experience, I didn't anticipate that
Yeah.
to the severity that it was. But then the financial piece, it's going to create a change. It's not maybe. It's going to create a change regardless if you're the breadwinner or not.
Right.
And one of the first things is not understanding the value of assets. We only paid $150,000 for our house. Well, that was 20 years ago.
Right.
And that's one of the things that you may, if that's not your world, you're not going to be familiar with it, and that's okay. But don't blindly just go through and assuming the other spouse has your best interest. And divorce can be a sticky situation. Not in every case. Don't go into it with a raised eyebrow and a magnifying glass, suspicious. I mean, go into it with open eyes, right? Not understanding that value of not only the assets but the liabilities as well. Number 2 is, again, that tax implication. If it's not just going to be split down the middle, taxes and everything else. And there are changes. Okay, well, if you're offering this X in order to, lower the Y or whatever the case may be, what are the tax implications on that? And again, that's where having a team in place. Lack of liquidity. It's great that you get the 401k and you split that, or maybe the house equity or the asset, but are you going to have liquid cash on hand? Because it's going to be a learning curve for you to be able to manage through that. Number 4 is the retirement benefits. Pensions, not just 401ks. A lot of boomers have pensions. Something to think about. What's that going to be looking at? And again, not having that long-term financial planning conversation. You're thinking for the day, did I get my half, everything else, and just kind of going on as business as usual. And you're not really thinking about, okay, I still want to retire at 67, but now I have half the assets and I don't have a partner helping me through this. What is that going to be? And again, I can't stress enough, have a financial coach that's somebody you get along with and that you relate to. Don't just go with, well, my sister does this, or my brother did this, or this is a guy my parents use. Find somebody that you can relate to and is going to have a conversation with you, not just tell you what to do. So,
yeah, I think we've really covered well the importance of having a financial planner, and I'm really glad you called out those aspects of, why, and you don't have to be wealthy, have over $1 million to have your own financial planner. So it's been a fantastic conversation with you today, John, and we're very happy that you came. I think our listeners have learned a lot of good information to help them through the divorce process. So can you tell us about your social media presence and how we can reach out to you if we'd like to find you?
Yeah. So I'm probably the easiest financial guy to get a hold of. I do that for my clients as well as just, again, I don't look at this as a job. I look at this as kind of my mission from God, my ministry, if you will.
Right.
So to get a hold of me, you can go to johncleaver.com. Now, I joke my family was poor, so there is no H in my name. We could only afford the 3 letters. So it's simply Jon Cleaver, just like Leave It to Beaver, CLEAVER.com. You can have access to my calendar right there. So if you have questions, there's a 15-minute calendar link there. Plus, there's a link to the videos I've done. I've put out over 140 videos on YouTube that are free to watch. There's no selling in it. It's just different aspects on how money works. And then I've got my channels that we do too, and that's at Black Swan Money. So if you go to Instagram, I'm on Pinterest. It's just look for Money Moves or at Black Swan Money. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, John, we're so glad that you could be here today, and I think you've given us some very important tips and information. And please join us for our next episode, and make sure to subscribe to the Silver Divorce Podcast. And we welcome your questions. Please contact us, and you can email us at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook page at Silver Divorce Podcast.
One thing I did want to add, and I appreciate being a guest on the show, and I think it's fantastic what you're doing, because I have the conversations privately, and you guys are getting it out in public. If somebody does need some help or guidance, if they reach out to me, we'll sit down with them free of charge and give them a personal financial review.
Oh, wow.
And it's a 20-page plus document on those 6 areas I was talking about earlier. Just reach out to me, mention the Silver Divorce Podcast, and we'll do that free of charge. No obligation. Take it, do something with it or not.
Thank you, John.
That's wonderful. So, yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on what Pat said about email us your questions. That is going to be confidential. If you email us a question, we will try to find the expert who can answer that, and we'll answer it on the air. We will not reveal your name, so feel welcome to do that. We also ask, if you're listening to us on Apple, please leave us a review. Reviews are very important to raise us up in the algorithm and help with our overall ratings. So whether you are considering divorce or you're newly in the divorce process, we'll help you navigate, and we'll tell you things that your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce is an event, It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Pat. Join us next time.
See you next time. Bye now.